This is the third and final video in the repair and conversion of a Waltham Vanguard 18 size 21 jewel movement. From the very beginning, my intention was to give this abandoned movement a new purpose. It is a huge movement for a big man. Not everyone will want to wear something like this on their wrist. Let us see how it turns out. After thoroughly cleaning all the parts, I can begin assembling the movement. I start with one of my favorite jobs, oiling the cap jewels. This is an excellent exercise in patience. Quite often, the oiling has to be repeated several times. The jewel must be handled very carefully so that the drop of oil does not touch the main plate. The first jewel is in place. Now the second one. The same procedure again. A tiny drop of oil on the surface of the jewel. Success. The second jewel is now in position. Next, I need to oil the lower balance cap jewel. This movement uses diamond balance cap jewels, and their polished facets are clearly visible. The next stage is the assembly of the keyless works. I apply a small amount of grease to the metal-to-metal contact surfaces between the shipper lever and the setting lever. Now I move to the other side of the movement to continue installing the remaining components. Again, a small amount of grease goes onto every metal-to-metal contact surface. I also lubricate the winding pinion where it engages with the teeth of the winding and setting clutch. The assembly is now ready to be placed into the main plate. A small amount of grease goes into the barrel arbor hole and the mainspring barrel is installed. The cap jewels for the escape wheel and pallet fork still need to be lubricated. These gold jewel settings are absolutely beautiful. Now I can begin the most difficult stage, installing the train bridge. 4 wheels and the pallet fork are all supported by this single bridge, and the pallet fork is the most troublesome part. It is extremely difficult to align all 4 pivots with their jewel holes without breaking anything. I temporarily secure the pallet fork to the bridge with Rodico. I am curious how other watchmakers handle this. I have never seen a video showing this particular stage of assembly. The bridge is now positioned above the main plate, and the delicate manipulation begins. I am sorry that the view is not perfect, but at this moment I was concentrating on not breaking anything, rather than on the quality of the recording. As you can see, when one wheel enters its jewel, another one does not necessarily follow. I can now remove the rotico. I press the bridge very gently toward the main plate. The entire time, I am afraid of damaging something. This is a very stressful operation. The fourth wheel has dropped into place, but the escape wheel is still not seated correctly. Success. It looks as though all the pivots are finally in their proper positions. Yes, definitely. I can now tighten the screws. One final check confirms that every pivot is seated in its bearing. A light touch on the center wheel sets the pallet fork in motion. That is proof that everything is working correctly. I return to the dial side to install the next components. First, I install the setting wheel. I apply a small amount of grease to its screw because the screw also serves as the pivot on which the setting wheel rotates. Next, I lubricate the pivots of the minute wheel and the center wheel. Then I install the cannon pinion and the minute wheel. Why is it called the minute wheel? Because it drives the cannon pinion, and the minute hand is mounted on the cannon pinion. Now I apply a tiny amount of oil to the remaining jewels on the dial side. Unfortunately, at this stage, I forgot to switch on the microscope camera, so this part of the video was recorded only with my phone. I turn the movement back to the bridge side and continue lubricating it. Each time, I place an extremely small drop of 9010 oil, just as all the watchmakers publishing their work on YouTube do. Now I will install the click. Sometimes I steady the screwdriver with my tweezers. This is a very useful technique because it prevents my fingers from blocking the view. A A small amount of grease goes onto the metal-to-metal working surfaces. Then I install the crown wheel and the ratchet wheel. I have to admit that these beautiful washers beneath the screws add an enormous amount of character to the movement. Converting this timepiece into a wristwatch makes it possible to look inside and admire all of its decoration. Now I give the winding stem a few more turns, and then I can install the balance. I place the balance into the movement for its first start after the overhaul. To be completely honest, I have to admit that the movement had already been ready to use a month earlier. All that remained was to close the rear caseback. The caseback is a snap-on type, and it fits extremely tightly. I could not press it into place with my inexpensive case press. Then, while I was handling the watch, it slipped from my hands, landed on my knees, and fell onto the floor. My heart nearly broke. Fortunately, the only damage was a broken balance staff. It could have been much worse: shattered glass, a dented bezel, or damage to the dial. Thankfully, none of that happened. Even so, this accident delayed the final casing of the movement. And now, at last, that moment has arrived. The balance is in place. The movement has started. I am extremely happy. Before continuing with the final assembly, I need to check how the movement performs after replacing the balance staff. In the horizontal positions, it runs remarkably well, especially considering that this movement is more than 100 years old. But because it will be working on someone's wrist, I also need to test it in the crown down and crown up positions. Here, unfortunately, the results are not as good. Even so, I am satisfied. It is time to secure the movement inside the case. This is an 18 size movement, and conversions of movements this large are not seen very often, but I decided to do it. There will always be big men who like big things, including big watches. A great deal of work was required to modify the case, but in the end, everything fits beautifully. The movement is firmly secured with no unwanted play. I turn to the dial side to install the hands. Even now, it is obvious that the dial is not properly aligned. Another problem to solve. Earlier, I noticed that the dial had only 2 feet, although it should have had 3. Apparently, whoever worked on it before did not ensure that the dial was correctly aligned with the movement. Unfortunately, this must be corrected. The seconds hand rubs against the dial, causing the movement to stop. It simply will not work like this. I have to correct the position of the dial feet. The correction is now complete. It took 2 hours. I had to relocate the dial feet so that both the center arbor and the seconds arbor passed exactly through the centers of their respective holes. I removed the balance during all the work on the dial feet. The fitting process had to be repeated many times, and leaving the balance installed would have created a serious risk of breaking the balance staff. Now I check whether the hands are seated correctly on their arbors. It looks very good. I install the balance once again. The movement starts without any problems. Now it is time to test fit the front bezel. A recess has been filed into the bezel for the setting lever. This makes it possible to pull the lever out easily with a fingernail. Well, the position of the bezel still needs a slight adjustment, because I cannot get my fingernail into the recess. Finally, it works. Now I can present the movement inside its case with both covers installed. The entire repair took a long time, but it was worth waiting, staying patient, and working carefully to reach this moment. The final step will be fitting the strap. I have ordered a black leather strap with a crocodile grain texture, and I am now waiting for it to arrive. The strap has just arrived, so I can finally begin fitting it to the watch. I plan to secure the screws against loosening on their own. For this, I will use the well-known Loctite thread locker. I place a tiny drop of the adhesive onto a piece of cardboard. Now comes a lot of careful manipulation. Unfortunately, aligning the screw with the internal thread inside the case lug is not easy. Sometimes it feels as though the screw has caught the thread, but after turning it, I discover that it will not go any farther. Finally, it is in. But this is only the beginning of the fun. The screw is fully inserted, but I still need to check whether the articulated lug can move freely. In its lowest position, it is slightly too tight, but I will leave it like this. The thread locker will do its job and prevent the screw from loosening. Now for the next lug. Oh, this one is a little too tight as well. I need to loosen the screw slightly. Yes, this position is correct. Now I can attach the strap, starting with the buckle side. I apply a tiny amount of thread locker inside the threaded steel tube that secures the strap. I tighten the screws from both sides. Because the tube rotates freely inside the strap, this method is much more convenient. Very nice. The upper part of the strap is now secured. Now for the lower section, the one with the adjustment holes. Done. Both parts of the strap are fitted. I will now show you the watch in all its glory. I simply cannot stop looking at all these beautiful decorations. The lovely gold jewel settings and the intricate decoration on the plates and bridges give this movement so much character. I should also mention that the crystals in both covers are still protected by transparent protective film. In a few places, the film is wrinkled or slightly scratched. This particular type of case is always supplied with protective film on its crystals. I also managed to capture the beautiful iridescent finish of the hands. This particular watch has been made for the father-in-law of a friend of mine. Anyone interested in having a similar watch made can contact me through pocketwatchdoctor.com or simply leave a message in the comments. Thank you very much to everyone who stayed with me until the very end.